Good morning, everyone. Welcome all of you joining the public presentation organized by the Occupational Health Center. We are so pleased to have Cassandra Porpiglia from the Prevention Consultant Safe Work Manitoba to do the topics on considerations for workers at greater risk of injury. So for beginning of the session, we would like to have the land acknowledgement. We would like to invite our occupational health nurse, Lisa Cooper, with doing her personal land acknowledgement. Thank you, Lisa.
All right, thank you, Tiffany, and welcome everybody to our Tuesday AM presentation. We're really happy to have Cassandra here. So my name is Lisa. I'm a settler here on these Indigenous lands. I am the child of Sam and Mary. My ancestors are from Northwestern Europe. I was born on the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Oji-Cree, Dene, and Dakota peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation, in a place today that is known as Winnipeg. As a settler here on this land, I value and I give thanks for the prairie grasses that lift my spirit when I walk beside them, for the sound of the loon that calms my mind, and for clean water that refreshes my soul. I make this acknowledgement today because Indigenous peoples are the original stewards of this land and water on which I live and I work. I commit to deepening my own understanding of local Indigenous communities and how systemic and institutional systems of power have oppressed and continue to oppress Indigenous peoples. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day and enjoy the presentation.
Thank you, Lisa. So for the participation, you could just put the comment and the question at the chat box area, and Cassandra will going to answer them after her presentation. And this event is being recorded, so we're going to sharing on the social media and you could review it later. And if you'll be able to cover all the questions, please follow up with us and just send us the email. So for some of the folks, I really welcome you, from Ontario, BC, or sometime out of the other province, so may not know about the Occupational Health Center. We are located on the 167 Sherbrooke Street, Winnipeg, Manitoba. We are funded by the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority. We are the community health center here in Manitoba. We provide the services to the Manitoba workers with work-related health issues and work closely with the Joint Workplace Health and Safety Committee for training. So our service is all free. Please visit our website for more information and resources. Now, this is the time to join me to welcome Cassandra. I'm going to stop screen now.
Great, thank you, Tiffany and Lisa. Thanks for having me. I'm just gonna share my screen here and hopefully we are good to go. Tiffany, are you able to see it okay?
I'm waiting the slide coming up.
Okay.
There you go, thanks.
Okay, we're good. All right, awesome, thanks again. So good morning, everyone. As Tiffany said, my name is Cassandra Porpiglia, and I'm a prevention consultant at Safe Work Manitoba. Safe Work Manitoba is a division of the Workers' Compensation Board of Manitoba, and we are dedicated to the prevention of workplace injury and illness, and we're working to try to create a culture of safety for all Manitobans. Right. See here. So today I will provide an overview of workers who could be at greater risk of injury and provide some suggestions and considerations for employers, as well as I want to show you a tool that's been developed by the Institute for Work and Health. It's their Occupational Health and Safety Vulnerability Measure, and this could be utilized also in your workplace to try to address worker vulnerability. There are many interpretations of worker vulnerability. So generally, when used in the health and safety context, a vulnerable worker refers to those workers at greater risk of injury or those who have greater exposure to unsafe or hazardous conditions. Workers can be at greater risk for workplace injury and illness due to a mix of individual and workplace factors. and some workers may lack the power to alter those conditions. So because of this, special considerations may be required. So who could be at greater risk of injury? So these are some examples, but there could be many more. So young workers, which are typically considered those aged 15 to 24 years old, workers new to Canada, workers new to the job, workers with limited English proficiency and or literacy, aging workers, which are considered those 55 and over, and workers in temporary jobs. So really, risk of injury and illness increases for individuals who also work in physically demanding or hazardous jobs, and workplaces who also do not have adequate safety and health management system programs or controls in place. So I'll talk about each of these in the upcoming slides here. So I'm going to start with young workers, but I did want to note that when looking at these slides, looking at the vulnerabilities as well as the protections that I'm going to talk about, really anything in these slides talking about these certain demographic groups could really apply to any worker in your workplace. And by implementing these protections or implementing these measures in your workplace should benefit all your workers and assist in reducing and preventing workplace injury and illness. But we do talk about young workers specifically because, as I said, those are considered age 15 to 24. So they are often new to work. So they may lack experience about work as itself, as well as the ways that they could get hurt at work. So some reason they may be at greater risk of injury could be that they don't want to ask questions because they want to make a good impression and look smart. They may think they are invincible and be more likely to take risks, or they might not be aware of the hazards and associated risks or how to protect themselves. So kind of some key things that like workplaces can do to try to address this would be to provide thorough training and orientation at the start of a worker's employment. And again, this would benefit all workers, particularly training them on current safe work procedures, explaining why this is the safest way to do the work, the reason for the safe work procedure, that safe work procedures have been developed based on hazards that have been identified, and that this is the safest way to do this job, which is why we have it and why we want them to follow the safe work procedures. We need to be encouraging them from the start about worker participation and feedback. So encouraging them to ask questions, bring forward concerns, having an accessible supervisor, manager, or mentor on hand that they can go to so that there's no kind of hesitation about asking a question, and ensuring that staff are also aware of consequences of not following safety rules and safe work procedures. So if you should have a developed discipline policy, and that policy should include discipline for safety violations as well, right? To just reiterate the importance of why we have those things in place. So I mentioned here Safe Workers of Tomorrow. So for anyone who's not familiar with Safe Workers of Tomorrow, or SWAT is their acronym, they provide free presentations to students across Manitoba, and they're designed to educate on young and new workers how to be safe on the job. So they can provide vocation-specific presentations or very general sessions. And they travel to schools, community clubs, or any places where young Manitobans come to learn. And their goal is to create culture among our province's future workers by meeting with them face to face and letting them know what they need to know when they're going into work. So based on a survey that Safe Workers of Tomorrow conducted, nearly 1 in 3 young workers indicated that they would not refuse to do work that they considered to be unsafe. I know for myself, when I started working at 15, I was not given my worker rights, so I didn't even know about them at the time. And there's definitely things that I think back on now that were not safe for me to do, but I did because I assumed that if I was being asked to do them, that I was capable of doing them, right? So I was lucky that nothing happened and that, you know, nothing too serious happened, but that's not the case for everybody, right? So seeing a statistic like this, even if they're aware of their right, but they still wouldn't exercise it, is concerning, and confirms that they could be at greater risk of injury, and they may be more likely to take risks. So this is why it is important for employers to ensure that workers' rights are explained at the beginning of employment. Again, regardless if a worker is young or not, right? Everybody needs to know and be reminded of their worker rights. And this is a requirement of a safety and health orientation. And I will kind of talk a little bit more about that in a couple slides here. So yes, all right. Let's see here. Okay. Sorry. There we go. All right. So I also mentioned here Manitoba's Young Worker Injury Prevention Strategy, which was developed in collaboration with partners in the safety and health community, and it was created to continue to address the over 4,000 young worker injuries that occur in workplaces each year in Manitoba. So if you're looking at the PowerPoint here, as you can see from 2012 to 2019, the number of young worker injuries has decreased, but we're still looking at over 4,000 young worker injuries each year, which is an unacceptable number. And also on average, 2 young workers lose their lives in workplace incidents each year, right? So we want to prevent that from happening. So the statistics noted in the strategy and on this slide come from the Workers' Compensation Board of Manitoba. And again, these change every year. So the strategy outlines some key initiatives, which includes raising awareness of young worker injury prevention, providing accessible and relevant safety and health information to parents and students before graduation, and ensuring employers have access to resources to effectively orient and train their workers. So this is available on our website at safemanitoba.com. It's on the bottom of every slide in case you forget. So also this is from the strategy as well, but based on WCB injury statistics, the top 3 subsectors for injuries to young workers from 2012 to 2019 were supermarket and department stores, building construction, and restaurants and accommodations. I know for myself, that was one of my first jobs, right, is the supermarket and department stores. I think so we're all pretty familiar with that. I will note that these can change from year to year, but you know, based on 2012 to 2019, that was the top 3. And if you look at these industries or these sectors, they can be very physically demanding and high hazard jobs, right? So bringing young people in with little experience, maybe unaware of like safety and health legislation and their rights, again, with that combination, we can puts them at greater risk of injury. So the Young Worker Readiness Certificate course is an excellent resource. It was launched in 2018 by SafeWork Manitoba and Employment Standards to prepare young people for work. So this course is required for anyone wanting to enter the workforce who is aged 13 to 15 years old, but really it is relevant for any young worker or anyone entering the workforce. So really, regardless of industry, any employer could make this course part of their orientation and training plan to ensure their new workers start off with a clear understanding of their responsibilities, rights, and expectations. The intent of this course is for workers to come away with the understanding and confidence to act on some important takeaways, which are, if it feels wrong, it likely is wrong. Just ask, and there's no such thing as a stupid question. So again, a lot of really great information, and it's a free resource for anyone to access. So I note on our this page here, there's a young workers safety toolkit on safemanitoba.com that has information for students or young workers, parents, educators, employers. There's a link there to Safe Workers of Tomorrow's website. You can access the Young Worker Strategy as well as the Young Worker Readiness Certificate course on there. And the certificate course, I think it's about a 2-hour session, and you do a test afterwards as well, and then get a certificate of completion. So a really great resource that is applicable to anybody. I learned a few things in there when I was taking it, because there's some stuff about employment standards as well. So it's good to know for sure. So then moving on to workers new to Canada. So workers new to Canada may have limited English proficiency or literacy. They may be hesitant to speak up or question authority due to cultural differences or fear of losing employment, which ties into also not being familiar with their rights as a worker or our local legislation here. And they also may be reluctant to say that they do not understand something. So someone new to Canada may be also entering a new industry that they've not previously worked in, which can also increase their risk of injury. So some suggested controls for this would be, if possible, to use interpreters or provide training in workers' first language, if that's an option. Looking at partnering with another worker who speaks that worker's first language, they might be able to assist with some of that, or having the worker perform an activity while supervised to verify understanding and to ensure that they are working safely. Perhaps, if you have a lot of newcomers in your workplace, when you develop safe work procedures, you could include a lot of pictures at every step of the process, because they may not be able to read it, but they should be able to hopefully understand the images. Encouraging workers to come to you, ask questions, ensuring that they understand their rights and responsibilities as well. So, why is this important? Well, immigration contributes greatly to Manitoba's growth and population, and so we need to ensure that our safety and health programs and systems address our ever-changing workforce and address all workers' needs. So just looking at this slide here, Manitoba Labor Market Forecast, a report from 2019 to 2025 noted that approximately close to 15,000 immigrants come to Manitoba each year, and that was predicted to increase over the next 5 years. Of course, with COVID happening and travel restrictions, unfortunately, our immigration numbers plummeted across Canada in 2020. So they did an updated report for 2021 to 2025. So in this report, it was noted that Manitoba only welcomed about 8,600 immigrants in 2020, which was a decrease of 54% from 2019. And it is now estimated that over the next 5 years, Manitoba's population will grow by immigration by about 69,000, right? So we do need to consider everyone's needs when we're training and giving information and testing for comprehension as well. So workers with limited English proficiency and or literacy. So this can impact workers across all ages, cultures, genders. This can be newcomers to Canada. It can also be people who are born and raised here as well. We don't really know. And the fact is that they are unlikely to self-identify that they have a low level of literacy, and often develop sophisticated coping mechanisms. So it's difficult to detect, this. So in order to address this barrier and reduce the risk of injury, it is recommended to ensure that your training is available through multiple mediums. There could be some reading portions, but then have hands-on training. Is there options to have videos playing as well. And then you should have methods in place to test for comprehension. So when I say test for comprehension, I don't necessarily mean a written formal test, as this would not likely work well for individuals with limited English proficiency or literacy. But looking at testing for comprehension by talking to the worker, so maybe doing a verbal test, observing work behaviors or asking them to demonstrate how to do a task based on developed safe work procedures, something like that. If there's the opportunity to use different styles of communication, like incorporating verbal, pictures, as I mentioned, universal symbols, videos, and so on. And you may also, if you have maybe a large population in your workplace with limited English or literacy, perhaps on your intranet or on bulletin boards around your facility, you could post information about literacy programs that workers might be able to attend, should they choose to. That would be optional, of course. And then moving along to new workers new to the job. So regardless of age or background, being new to a job is a key risk factor for occupational injury and illness. If you were to Google, you know, how likely or what the statistics are for how likely someone is to get hurt within their first 3 months or first 6 months off the job, there are varying statistics, but they indicate that you're a higher risk, especially when you're new to a job. So it's important to know what a new worker means according to the legislation. So according to the Workplace Safety and Health Regulation in Part 2, they provide that description there. So a new worker means a worker who is new to the workplace, is moved from one area of a workplace to another area of the workplace that has different processes or hazards, is relocated to a different workplace that has different processes or hazards, or is returning to the same workplace, but the processes or hazards in the workplace changed while the worker was away. I know there might be some people from different provinces here, so you should check your local legislation, obviously, to get your definition, but I'm sure it's somewhat similar. So it is important because I think we are really good at orienting and talking with people new to the workplace, but then the other three, I think a lot of times we don't look at that. So I think for myself, when I was originally hired with Workers' Compensation Board, I was hired in 2015 to do the claim side of things. And then in 2018, I moved over to Safe Work Manitoba, which is still a division of the Workers' Compensation Board. So it's same employer, but essentially a different department. And I was also at different job, different work that was being performed. You know, I was going to have to go out and meet people and do training and a lot of work with external people, as opposed to on the claim side where I was primarily on the phone with people. And also just different location as well, different building. So when I moved departments, there was new work processes and hazards present. So I received an orientation when I moved over to this area, but I was still with the same company, right? So it is important to have processes in place for that. Or if you have someone who's maybe been on a medical leave or parental leave of some sort, when they come back, depending on how long they've gone, maybe nothing's changed or maybe lots of things have changed, right? So instead of just kind of throwing them back into it, have that orientation or chat with them and let them know kind of what's been going on or what's changed in the last little bit, right? So then we have aging workers. So according to Stats Canada, older workers in Canada nearly tripled in number from 1996 to 2018. So older workers are considered those aged 55 and over. I would like to note that I did not pick this number or anything like that. This is just generally the consensus, I guess, when it comes to older workers, as the term goes. But I would like to note that anybody could be experiencing these vulnerabilities, not just aging workers or those 55 plus. So it is important to keep that in mind. So aging workers may have some physical or health-related challenges that they are experiencing and may not want to disclose, which could put them at greater risk of injury because it may impact the way that they do their job or the way that they work. As I said, though, anyone at any age could be experiencing physical or health-related challenges, so it's important to have protections in place to try to address this in your workplace. So some suggestions for protections include ensuring you have open communication and that you're promoting at all levels, including your ability to accommodate restrictions for both work and non-work related difficulties that a worker might be having. You should be reviewing your jobs regularly to ensure that the work is being performed in the safest way possible. And if it's not, we need to update that. Implementing ergonomic changes that benefit all workers are very helpful if possible, but there is typically or can be a cost factor to that. Looking to your experienced worker for their knowledge and experience, and maybe they can move into a training capacity or a mentor capacity, and trying to rotate physically demanding positions as well can also be helpful. So this poster comes from the Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety, or CCOHS, and speaks to Canada's aging workforce. It does provide some statistics as well as discusses the many benefits of having experienced workers on hand. But if you do look at the top right-hand side of it, it notes protections that can be put in place, similar to what I just mentioned on the previous slide, and again, how these protections really benefit all of your workers. So I would encourage you to check out CCOHS's website, as they have a lot of great information regarding safety and health generally, as well as information about workers who may be at greater risk of injury as well. All right, so kind of speaking of those, so regardless really of the demographics in your workplace, worker vulnerability to injury is a result, as I said, of a combination of both personal and workplace factors. And you want to ensure that your workplace is adequately addressing all your workers' needs. So workers could be at greater risk of injury because of lack of experience, fear of losing employment, power imbalance, health or risk factors, different abilities, language, literacy, cultural differences, unaware of worker rights and local legislation, and again, inadequate training provided regarding workplace safety and health procedures and programs. So just take a minute here to kind of share some personal experience with this. So I have many family members who immigrated to Winnipeg and Manitoba from Italy when most of them were 17 or 18 years old when they came here. Majority of them went into various forms of construction. So thinking of those kind of groups that we just talked about, they kind of hit them all, right? So they were new workers to the job and industry, never worked construction before, new to Canada, young workers with minimal experience. None of them could read, write, or speak English at the time. And many of them worked into their late 60s before they retired. They were also all at greater risk of injury, in combined with all those things that I just mentioned. Those are also very physically demanding jobs, very dangerous, high hazard work, working with a lot of machinery and equipment. And at the time, when we're talking about these people coming in the 60s and 70s, where, from what I've heard, safety and health was not really a priority. They just needed bodies to get the work done, right? So there wasn't well-developed, programs and training and whatnot. They just kind of learned as they did stuff, right? And the stuff that they're doing, though, could kill them, right? And so it's very dangerous. And, unfortunately, as a result of this, the combination of both their personal vulnerabilities as well as, obviously the workplace risk factors and lack of safety and health. I have many family members, unfortunately, with permanent injuries, amputations. I have had many family members who've had to have at least one or multiple surgeries as a result of workplace incidents, a lot of musculoskeletal injuries, and so on, right? But at the time, again, it was you needed to work. They were sending money back home. You didn't want to lose your job, and so you did what you had to do, right? And as much as we want to think we've progressed and moved past that, and we have gotten better, there is definitely still room for improvement, right? And some places need more than others, right? So it is important to think about that. So what can employers do, right? So as I mentioned already, right, this is kind of a recap of what I've mentioned, but provide safety information, right? So worker training and new worker orientation is key. And we need to make sure that we're prioritizing safety and health at the start of a worker's employment. We can't assume that workers know about the hazards of a job. And good sense really is made up of training, knowledge, and experience, right? So if we don't have that going in, we have to kind of assume they know nothing and give them all the information. So as I mentioned, a new worker orientation is a requirement under the Workplace Safety and Health Regulation Part 2. And this table here summarizes what that orientation must include. We do also have a resource on our website. If you were to search safety and health orientation, we have a bulletin that also summarizes what the legislation states. I'm not going to go through all of them here because we have limited time this morning, but as you can see, right, safety, rights, and responsibilities is number 1, hazards and controls, safe work procedures, emergency procedures, first aid kits, right? These are all like things that everyone at work needs to know, right? And again, it's not just about doing this one time ever, because do things change in our workplace, and how are we communicating those changes to our workplace? And then when we talk about training, right, safety training is required for all people in the organization. It is necessary, right, to ensure that workers are aware of their basic rights and responsibilities, know about the hazards and controls in place, and also that's a good place to encourage participation to try to make your workplace safer. You need to ensure that your training is being provided by a competent person. Often a supervisor is typically who does this. And competent means having the necessary knowledge, experience, and training to perform a specific duty. There are also many different theories about how adults learn. And the common consensus is that no one method is sufficient for training for everyone, right? And that we need to try to incorporate different learning styles and preferences. So if we can incorporate auditory, visual, handouts, and hands-on practical methods, typically a combination of those works best. It is also important to note that people do not retain what they are taught if they don't apply it immediately. So if there's going to be a change in 6 months from now, it's not really beneficial to do training 6 months ahead of time, right? If we should do it right before that change is about to happen so that it can be applied immediately. Again, when possible. When training is correctly facilitated, it's a great means of communicating critical information, increasing knowledge, skills, and affecting attitudes, helps to verify understanding and competence, empowers our people, demonstrates due diligence, and as I said, it is a regulatory requirement. So when you're thinking about your training practices and techniques for workplaces, you want to consider if your methods are appropriate for all of your workforce, right? And then do we have a system to check or verify understanding, right? But when we're considering that, we need to consider like language, cognitive, perceptual, and cultural barriers to learning. So again, having some options for verification methods might be a great option. So, looking at written, oral, or performance-based testing to confirm comprehension can be helpful. So I'll bring in another personal story here. So as I said, my family members who work in construction, we went from the 60s and 70s where there was no kind of safety and health training to, in the 2000s where things have gotten a lot better. But that being said, a lot of the companies that my family members worked for went to e-learning, which is great. Not bashing e-learning here, but you have to consider people's ability to use computers and navigate that. Are you providing them time and a device to do that on? Also, all my family members learned English and can read and write English as well and speak it. But there is some limitations with that. So, does your e-learning have an auditory component where someone's kind of reading the information to you? Because that can be helpful. But then again, usually there's a test at the end, and someone with limited English or literacy might fail that test or not be able to do it well. So workarounds for my family members, because there was no other option, would be to pay a coworker to do the test for them or take the course for them. And that included supervisors and some safety people as well, unfortunately, from stories that I've heard. So that's not good, right? Because then they're not getting the information they need. And while that e-learning likely works for 90 to 95% of your population, there's still 5 to 10% that it doesn't work well for. So a simple, like I said, workaround might be the auditory component, and then a supervisor sitting down with the worker and verbally doing the test. You should still be documenting the results and everything like that, so you have that information, but we have to consider if what we have in place works for everyone. So this ties into having accessible, competent supervision. So you need people around for people to go to and ask questions. And then how often are they providing information? So how do you communicate changes in the workplace or safety and health information to your workers, right? And if someone's not there, how do we make sure they get that information, right? So also communicating often and through multiple channels can also be beneficial, right? So have your safety talks, your team meetings, but then also email, can you post it? Do you have an intranet, right? Anywhere where someone might be looking for information, make sure that it's accessible to them. Supervisors should be observing work behaviors and enforcing compliance with your legislative components as well as your workplace policies and procedures, right? So if your workplace, might do more than what the legislation requires, you should be enforcing that, right? Or your supervisor should be enforcing that. They should be providing coaching, training, feedback, checking for understanding to make sure that people are doing it right. Just giving someone a safe work procedure, telling them to read it and sign off on it may not be sufficient. It might work for some people, but might not work for everyone. And then, as I said, provide training to new people, but also we need to provide refresher training. I can't tell you how many workplaces I go to and workers have been there for 20 years and they've received training once when they started, and if they even had that, because maybe when they started there wasn't a robust training program, right? So likely in 20 years things have changed. I'm sure that there's something has had to have changed, I'm sure, and be updated. So we need to have a system in place for refresher training and tracking that as well. And typically that would be in relation to policies, procedures, and safety rules. So encouraging participation and feedback is key. Being aware of who works at your workplace, and then make sure that everyone, that your safety and health program is relevant to all of your workers. Ensure your safety materials such as safe work procedures or safety rules are written and communicated in a format that all workers can understand. So again, where possible, using symbols, pictures, pictograms, as much as possible. They should be clear and concise as well. If available, or if you can translate it into dominant languages in your workplace or use interpreters. Safe Work Manitoba has a lot of different safety resources available in multiple languages, but not everything is converted, unfortunately, or translated. But there are lots of different services out there that you can use, government and private, that are available to you if you Google it. So I would definitely check that out. Also looking at life safety systems, have they been adapted? So do you have visual, audible alarms, ramps, and those kinds of things as well? All right, so I'm going to try to wrap it up in the next 10 minutes here, but we have an example here of a mentorship program. So this is called the Green Hand Gold Hand program. So it was designed to reduce workplace injuries among young or new or inexperienced workers. And it helps to orient workers and increase their awareness by learning from mentors, which would be the gold hands. So green hands would be the young, new, inexperienced individuals, and gold hands would be the more experienced, knowledgeable individuals that people can go to. So a gold hand may or may not be a supervisor, and this would just be someone who would have to kind of agree to be a mentor. But it just kind of highlights, who's new, and we maybe need to look out for these individuals. And then the gold hand symbolized to them, who can I go to if I have a question and maybe my supervisor is not around. So this is currently being rolled out in the manufacturing sector in collaboration with Made Safe. But the goal is to expand it to other sectors within Manitoba. So again, maybe you don't wear safety gloves at your workplace, but maybe you wear name tags. So maybe you could have an indicator on your name tags or something like that. But it's a great kind of mentorship program and way for people to look out for one another. So just a little bit more information here, but essentially, right, this is trying to create interaction and dialogue between young workers and more experienced workers. So your should be knowledgeable about your company's safety program, have site safety experience, and be comfortable acting as a mentor. So they should be approachable and willing to answer questions and offer help, or if they see something, they would say something to a green hand. And it is a voluntary role, so they would have to agree to that. But it's I think, a beneficial program, and again, just one example of something you could do in your workplace. So other considerations to think about is this comes from, and I'll just note, this comes from the Safe Work Certification Audit tool. So in that tool, there is a component about protecting workers who may be more vulnerable to injury. And so this is something that would be looked at. So, does your safety and health management system include processes to identify and support workers who may be at greater risk of injury? So examples of this could be, you could have maybe a separate policy, or you might incorporate considerations for workers at greater risk of injury into an existing policy that you have. And these could be physical or health related as well. Perhaps you review and reference the Accessibility for Manitoba's Act, whose purpose is to remove and prevent barriers that affect members of Manitoba's labor force. You might have a vulnerable worker form, a self-identify form that workers complete at the start of their employment. If you do have something like that, though, I would recommend seeking legal advice to ensure that you are not, violating any Privacy or Health Act information with that. Another question in the tool is, are there developed and implemented processes to assess vulnerability to risk of injury that address and support the needs of all workers? So again, looking here, examples of this would be mentorship programs. Do you have language services available if need be, multiple lingual signage? Do you have the ability to accommodate work hours? Work placements are tailored to maximize ability or availability, or do you have ergonomic enhancements? Again, that would benefit all workers. And then if you do have these in place, do you have a system in place then to evaluate the effectiveness of these supports as well? So we're running a little low on time, so I'm going to skip. I had a couple learning or case study scenarios here, so I'll move on to the second one because it just ties into my last few slides here. This is a made-up scenario, but it is based on a coworker of mine's, experience at a workplace. So, but basically, BSB's company's head office recently moved from the first floor to the newly renovated sixth floor. During the excitement of the move and unpacking, the fire alarm sounds and all staff need to evacuate the building. Sally has a prosthetic leg and has substantial difficulty using the stairs to evacuate the building. This was not previously a concern when their office was located on the first floor. So it kind of ties back to, as I said, about like new worker, right? So now we've moved to a new facility or a new location. There are new issues that need to be considered, right? And again, maybe not for every person, but for some people that might present some challenges. So this definitely is a safety and health concern, right? Because we need to ensure that in the event of an emergency, that Sally can evacuate the building safely and in a timely manner. If she is rushing, she could injure herself or others potentially. If others are trying to assist with getting her out, right, that could delay things as well. So we don't want that to be the case. So, how could this process be improved? Well, we need to meet with Sally and come up with a plan. Do we look at, say, purchasing a device to help with the evacuation process? There's like EvacuTrax, for example. But that being said, if we do that, then we need to inform people on a need-to-know basis, right? So fire wardens, HR, supervisors, whoever that might be. And we would also need to then practice that process and make sure it works well, right? So example, at Safe Work, we have a security department that when we start, they ask this question and we let them know if we need assistance during an emergency evacuation. And then again, it's told to whoever on a need-to-know basis, right? So we need to consider our emergency management as well, which ties into these last few slides that I have here. So it is important to note that workers have different abilities and may face challenges. These could be permanent or temporary, visible or invisible, work-related or not work-related. So, there may be individuals who require assistance during an emergency evacuation. So you should have a process in place. This is just an example of a process that you could look at. You may have your own, or you might want to look at reviewing that. But essentially, recommendation would be for a leader, so such as the supervisor, and the worker would meet. The worker would need to sign likely a consent form just to provide that information, again, to whoever needs to know. It's not for everybody, obviously, but only on a need-to-know basis. And then working through an emergency information worksheet to consider the worker's abilities to, say, read and access information during an emergency, see strobe devices, hear fire alarms, use fire exits, fit mobility devices into staircases, exit the building without assistance or support, or evacuate during a stressful or crowded situation could potentially be a barrier for some. So then based on that emergency worksheet, you would create an individual plan. Again, share copies of that consent form, the emergency information worksheet, and the individual emergency response plan with, again, anyone on a need-to-know basis. So that could be human resources, direct managers, fire wardens, safety officers or safety people in your workplace, and security. You should review that plan annually to ensure that needs are met, but also let the worker know that they are responsible for notifying the employer of any changes or updates to their plan. Again, I would recommend seeking legal advice just to make sure that your form is okay and that you're not, again, violating any privacy or health facts. So another consideration for emergency management, again, this comes from our Safe Work certified audit tool, but looking at, are your emergency plans written and communicated in a way that all workers can understand, right? So do they meet the needs of all workers? Is it posted? Is it accessible? Does everyone know where to find the information? And is there a process to identify if anyone needs additional assistance, right? That's typically what we'd be looking for. So I'll just end off just noting this tool that's also available free to you through the Institute for Work and Health. So when they look at assessing vulnerability in the workplace, they don't really focus on demographic factors. Here, they're more focusing on workplace factors, right? So it's looking at kind of 4 areas: the hazard exposure, workplace policies and procedures, worker awareness of hazards and rights and responsibilities, and then workers' empowerment to participate in injury and illness prevention. So this is a tool, again, that's available and download if you'd like. So part 1, which is on the slide here, focuses on how often a worker does certain tasks or how often they experience certain hazardous conditions in the workplace. And then part 2, 3, and 4 are asking the worker about the 3 types of resources that may lessen the effects of being exposed to hazardous conditions, so policies and procedures, awareness, and empowerment. The recommendation from IWH is to administer this questionnaire anonymously and to offer it to as many workers as possible. And as I said, it focuses more on labor force and workplace factors as opposed to demographic factors as the source of vulnerability. So this might be a really great starting place for you as well. So again, these are parts 3 and 4. All right, so I'm going to quickly do a recap and then we'll do questions here. So just make sure that you do have a process to identify and support workers who may be at greater risk of injury, create, review, or implement workplace policies and procedures, ensure that you're promoting occupational health and safety awareness and promoting a culture that encourages participation and feedback, because that will help a lot. You need to consider your safety and health management system as well as your emergency management system. You should be providing training through many avenues and provide refresher training and check for understanding and effectiveness. Understand these needs require ongoing evaluation through program review and risk assessment, change management procedures, observation, and incident investigation. All right, so that's it in a nutshell. So I'm going to stop sharing here and we will go to the question.
Thank you, Cassandra. So I have already copy and paste the question on the document, so you please review it. And if any folks have any more questions to Cassandra, please, submit it on the chat area here, then we could look after it. So we still have about 7 minutes for the section to answer your questions.
Okay, so one of the questions or comments here is, I think it is very important to write policies and procedures at the right level for the workforce. Most time they are too long and too complex and not easy to understand. So there's a great tool to grade the policies as a great resource. So it's called Gunning Fog Index. So that's great. I couldn't agree more. From my understanding, the usually recommendation for writing safer procedures would be it should be at kind of a grade 8, grade 9 level of writing. And like you said, not everyone's gone to university and having too much information or making it too complex or using too big of words is not going to be helpful. So I couldn't agree more. And thank you for sharing that great resource as well. And then do you have examples in French of a discipline policy for safe work? You know what, I would have to check our website. So if you go to our website, at the bottom of the page, at the bottom of the screen, you can actually click, there's a French tab, and any resources that we have you can access in French. We probably have the most resources in French, I would say, and we're trying to make sure that all of our resources are, but I don't know offhand if our discipline policy, because I do believe we have an example of that. I don't know if it is on there, but yeah, and there's, like I said, all the languages that we offer are on the bottom of the page, and you can click and it'll change the website for you. And also any resources that we click on, if they are available in other languages, it'll indicate that by the beside the page there. All right, was there any, those were the only ones that I see for questions.
Yes,
Tiffany, was there
so
any
far,
other?
I'm still waiting for the folks to submit the question for us.
Oh, okay, sounds good.
Yeah. But anyway, by the time, I really appreciate, Cassandra, you sharing really, really good resources and information about new workers, aging workers, right? And then young workers. So how the employer should be doing to supporting the workers. So we have just new question come in. So I just copy it. Did you see the new questions, Cassandra?
Yes. So the question was, do you send out any sort of confirmation of attendance for continuing education requirements for certifications? So I should say, so I mean, with Safe Work, like we have like all the e-learning courses that we have on our website do come with a certificate of attendance or completion. I would say most training that you do come with that. If you don't, like, even if you go to conferences and whatnot, they may not offer that for everybody, but if you request it, they'll usually be able to give you a confirmation of that. And then you should be tracking that at your workplace as well. So I hope that provides you with, that's the answer to that question. But if it's not, please let me know and we'll try to answer it better.
So another new question just come in. Mm-hmm.
So how do employers ensure they have competent supervisors? What does competent mean? So based on the legislation, competent means that they have the training, knowledge, and experience to do that. So I mean, there is a judgment call, I would say, when it comes to that, right? But that, and so again, looking at their knowledge, experience, do you find that, before you promote someone, do they follow your safety rules, right? All that kind of stuff. Are they a promoter of safety and health? That might be helpful. Do they follow your developed rules? Have they worked there for a long time? What's kind of the consensus with people working with them as well? But there is a judgment call there, right? So that's what the legislation defines competent as. So that's what I would be looking for primarily myself. But again, judgment call there a little bit.
Yeah, this is another questions about the resources.
Okay, so what are some good resources for employers to review to protect staff from loud noise, possible hearing damage in the workplace? So I know on Safe Work Manitoba's website, we do have information about that. I would also, like a lot of companies, I mean, I know there typically is a cost to that, but looking at doing, some audiometric testing to kind of verify or confirm what the noise exposure is, because that will help you give you a sense of what kind of protection should be in place, because it really depends on the level of noise exposure, whether you would have mandatory or recommended controls in place, and different levels of noise are more dangerous than others. Right. So I would check out our website. We do have an occupational health and safety kind of department here at Safe Work and Workers' Compensation Board, as well as Workplace Safety and Health branch, right? So those are the enforcers of the legislation as well. So they're also, not only do they come and inspect your workplace and issue orders, but you can actually give them a call and ask questions as well and get them to help you interpret the legislation if it is more of a legislation compliance question. So a great phone number to have on hand is 204-957-SAFE or 204-957-7233. That is, you can access Workplace Safety and Health branch, Safe Work Manitoba, and Workers' Compensation Board by calling that number. So, and if you go to our website and under the contact, it's listed there as well.
So I think this is the time to wrap up the session. Thank you so much, Cassandra, again, for what a great session you've given us to us. and for all the resources and then all the comments and recommendation of what the employers to support the vulnerable workers in the workplaces. And thank you all of you to joining the presentation. So the session has been recorded. We're going to send it out with the PowerPoint presentation in PDF format. So thank you all of you for joining and give us some comment and good questions. So see you next time though. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.